Thank you, Forrest. We appreciate it. And just for those of you who are interested in your music history, that song, Blue Moon by Rodgers and Hart, is probably the mother of every doo-wop song in history. They all took after this song, and it became quite a big response. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are so happy to have you join us today, either online or here in person. My name is Tim McGahey, and I'm going to be your service associate today. And while we're doing this, including me, please set your telephones to silent or to airplane mode or whatever you'd like to do, just so that way it won't accidentally ring. We are a welcoming community, a welcoming congregation, whoever you are, however you identify, wherever you come from, whoever you love, you are welcome here. And our Sunday services are different each week, so that we can honor and learn from many of the traditions that we have. We come from a wide array of traditions and beliefs, and we like to celebrate all of that. And today our speaker is Dr. Reverend I'm sorry, I'm through here. She will be speaking, and actually she'll be introducing herself and talking a little bit about it. I asked her today, I said, we're the kind of people who sort of like to know where you come from and what you're doing, and so she'll get a chance to explain that. Today I'm going to be lighting the flaming chalice. The chalice is a symbol of the light of learning and the love of our community. And as our congregation's chalice is lit, we invite you at home to light your own chalice. And now let us join in singing hymn 362, Rise Up, O Flame.
Rise up, O flame, my light.
words today are going to, I will be reading these. Here it is. This is, when I asked about this morning, I thought, let me find something. And these were provided by our speaker. And today's readings are from the outro of Octavia's Blood, Science Fiction Stories from Social Justice Movements. And it's edited by Adrienne Marie Brown and Walida Imarisha. And the outro was written by Adrienne Marie Brown. We hold so many worlds inside us, so many futures. It is our radical responsibility to share these worlds, to plant them in a soil as our society needs the seeds for the type of justice we want and need. It has been beautiful to gather these stories, collaboratively edit them, and begin to understand not just the challenges we face or the enemies we need to transform, but the abundance of imagination we in the social justice realm hold and must cultivate. We see ourselves as a growing wave of folks connecting science fiction, what we often call visionary fiction, with social justice. Science fiction is the perfect exploring ground as it gives us the opportunity to play with different outcomes and strategies before we have to deal with real world costs. In the process of hearing and working these stories, we develop tools, frameworks, and principles that help us bring the word off the page and into the lives of the people. The elements of visionary fiction are that it explores current social issues through the lens of sci-fi. It is conscious of identity and intersecting identities. It centers on those. It explores current social issues through the lens of sci-fi. It's just conscious of identity and intersecting identities. It centers those who have been marginalized, is aware of power inequalities, and is realistic and hard but hopeful. It shows change from the bottom up rather than the top down. Highlights that change is collective and is not neutral. Its purpose is social change and societal transformation. The stories we tell can either reflect the society we are part of or transform it. If we want to bring new worlds into existence, then we need to challenge the narratives that uphold current power dynamics and patterns. We call upon science fiction, fantasy, horror, magical realism, myth, and everything in between as we create and teach visionary fiction. Let us go to our opening hymn, and that, here we are, it's hymn 1, that's in our teal, I believe
it's a teal hymnal. It's number 1040 on the teal hymnal, but I don't know if they're going to have the words up here or not. We're going to do 3 verses. I'm going to sing the first verse to you, and so you can hear it, but I want you to back. Speed up, don't speed up. Don't speed up. Now keep that going. You may think you're on 4, 3, 1, 3, but you're not.
give ourselves a hand on that. Thank you. We are now going to look at our reading from here, and if you will share with me, we're going to be reading the principles that we agree to, and hopefully we'll get all of them on here. We can covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equality, and compassion in human relations, acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part, journeying toward diverse, seeking. Well, I'll read the last one here, and that is a journeying towards spiritual wholeness by working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. We are ready now to have our children leave us. If we're going to go out, and while we sing, we will do hymn number 413 up here on our board. Go now in peace, go now in peace, may the love of us surround you everywhere, everywhere you may go. Now we are going to have a moment of meditation, reflection, and prayer. And the singing bowl will lead us into silence. After the silence, you're invited to join in the song Spirit of Light, which will be up on the board, hopefully. And I will tap the bowl and we will have time. As mentioned earlier, Unitarian Universalists have a wide array of beliefs, and the speaker at our Sunday services come from many traditions. And today here is Reverend Rachel Rogers, who is going to tell us more about what was meant in our in the reading that she gave us to hear. Please come.
Good morning. I'm going to adjust this. It's like in my eyeball. So when I arrived, Tim said, "Can you just get up and introduce yourself?" And I said, "More than happy to do that. What would you like? How would you like me to go about that?" And he was like, "Well, how did you, end up here in this place and this time?" And I was like, well, "How long do y'all have?" The tradition I come from is I'm a Unitarian Universalist. My name is Rachel Rogers. I prefer they and she pronouns. I live in Nashville. I'm a member of First UU Nashville. I'm also an aspirant to Unitarian Universalist ministry. So I'm a student. Well, I say I am a student. I have been on a sabbatical from my studies at Meadville Lombard Theological School. I'm heading back in the fall. So technically I'm in a liminal space, but I am a seminarian. So that's how I came to be here. This is my second time with you guys, and I'm so thrilled to be back with you. Thank you for welcoming me into your congregation. And it's interesting hearing the reading that I sent along so early in the service today. I was like, people are going to be like, what are we doing? And we are going to talk a little bit about science fiction, which is a source of inspiration, and I think there's some divinity there. But what we're really going to focus on a little more broadly, and I'll dig into this as I start looking down a little bit more at the page, is how we can use the act and enjoyment and participation in storytelling to help us build new worlds and shape not only our justice movements, but our perspectives and our outlooks on the world. Now, I do come to you at a time when many things seem dark and difficult in the world, at least from where I stand and look out. This is a time when our denomination, the Unitarian Universalist Association, has felt recently the need to publicly decry acts of aggression and dehumanization across the world, while we see so many governments turning a blind eye. I also come to you at a time when many of us are mourning the death of Nex Benedict, the non-binary teenager from Oklahoma who died this past week following an altercation with fellow students at their school after ongoing bullying. On my home front, just a bit to the south in Tennessee, we are continually facing an onslaught of legislation targeting marginalized people, including a current push to ban both Pride and Black Lives Matter flags in our schools, while making an exception for the display of the Confederate flag. It's rough. And at times like this, it can feel hard to be hopeful. At times like this, it can be hard to recognize those hope-galvanizing glimmers of the miraculous. On the flip side, it can be difficult to make rational sense of the painful oppression that feels like it's happening all around us. During these times, many of us can find ourselves caught in a loop of trying to either distract ourselves or dig really deep to try to understand things. And these are exercises that can leave our heads spinning. As Unitarian Universalists, we are committed to fighting for justice. Many of us also practice a deep rigor around understanding our neighbors and the choices they make, either to help settle our own bewilderment or to cultivate compassion for those different from us. We are, as one of our hymns states, a gentle, angry people, and we plant our feet firmly on the side of love. And this means that one of our highest callings is to stay committed to building a new future for ourselves, one that is justice-filled and that centers on the inherent worth and dignity of each of us. We are called to imagine new futures and new ways of being. We are called to practice as though we are already living there. We are called to find joy even among the suffering. to cultivate a practice of rational thought while also boldly and prophetically speaking truth to power and proclaiming our belief that it is possible for us, as I've said, to build a new way. That we can build a new world, that another, more justice, love-filled world is possible. And isn't all of that quite a tall order? In my own experience, in order for us to stay engaged in this work, in order for us to find the energy to press forward and to march ahead into what can sometimes feel like hostile territory that is dense with obstacles, I believe we must first ground ourselves in hope. For my part, when things feel particularly grim, and I'm not easily finding opportunities to connect with hope or to remind myself of all the beauty and the divinity that truly do weave this planet together, I am reminded that we need to stay curious. And we need to stay ever mindful that there are ways of being and doing, of building community that we haven't even thought of yet. And in making that realization, we also have the opportunity to put the, dare I say it, overly rational, I know some people may not think that's possible, that you can be overly rational, naysaying voices in our head that want to name real progress to be something unattainable by always stopping to ask ourselves, what else is possible? In order to do all of these things, in order to fulfill our vision for the future and continue fighting for justice, in order to keep a mind that is open and alive and attuned to these new possibilities, we need tools. We need tools that help us bridge the gap between knowing what is needed and understanding how to achieve what is possible. Audre Lorde said that the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house. Well, this means we need to develop new tools, or possibly repurpose ones we already have to meet new ends. As an exercise in understanding how we bridge gaps from perceiving seemingly impossible missions into exciting, achievable undertakings, I'd like to hone in on one particular set of such tools, one that not only asks us what else is possible, but that actively works to answer it. Now, my entire life, I've been a voracious reader. I was raised to be one. My father is an avid reader across genres, and he instilled in my sisters and myself a passion for story. I don't think he ever said no to us when it came to buying a new book. I can't remember one single time. And so this means that I've inherited his problem of somehow never having enough space for the books I've acquired. Now, for his part, his retirement gift to himself was to convert the bonus room of my parents' house into a library. It was a lifelong dream of his. So he has a room that has both of its long walls lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves. And every single one of them is full. He's 71, he's got time left. I don't know where he's going to put the new ones, but it is full. Now, within my dad's library lies what for some could look like a life of contradictions. My father is an archpriest in the Eastern Orthodox Church, and he has dedicated a huge portion of his life to caring for the flock of his congregation and deepening his own theological understanding. This means there is a large section of books that centers on these topics, from writings of the church fathers to volumes that explore Orthodox theology, histories of religions, lives of the saints, volume after volume of liturgical texts, because in the Orthodox Church there are volumes and volumes of liturgical texts. I'm looking at James. Okay. This section of his library could be a bit of a dream for a Christian who is seeking the history of the faith and ways in which to actively live that faith in these times. And for my part, I can almost smell the incense and hear the gentle chime of the bells on the censer as it swung around the churches of my youth when I'm looking at the spines of these books. To be a part of my father's faith means to have the opportunity to discover centuries of work that illumine the reader on theology, that work to pass rich dogma from one generation to the next and explain many of the contradictions that can actively pop up for someone practicing an ancient religion in a modern world. Now, this section probably takes up 1/3 of one of the 2 long walls up close to his desk. And the other 2/3 of that same wall hold volume after volume of mostly fiction. However, these are not volumes of classic literature or even more modern texts that would earn the genre label of, say, literary fiction. And he does read those. I mean, he's never not reading. He has like this ledger notebook that he writes down this long list of like what's next that's pages and pages long. Like he's pre-planned like the next decade of his reading, it feels like. I do the same thing. I can't help it. But what's not shocking to me, because I know my father, but what might surprise some others when perusing the library of a 71-year-old man of the cloth, is that the rest of that large wall of books is almost entirely packed with volumes of science fiction. From Philip K. Dick to Tolkien, more fantasy than science fiction, but you understand what I'm talking about, Ursula K. Le Guin to N.K. Jemisin and more modern authors, my dad's shelves offer book after book that take on the exercise of imagining new worlds. Some reimagine the realms of this world. For a time, my bedtime story was a chapter a night of The Hobbit. Others, quite possibly most of them, are imagining different possible futures. Worlds where groups of explorers, scientists, adventurers, or some unlikely set of heroes set out to build a new life or navigate uncharted territories, often off of this planet or on worlds that have been completely drummed up from the author's imagination. Let's pause for a moment and think a little bit more about the deep kind of dichotomy that you could perceive when looking at this one wall of bookshelves. On one side, you have a theological library working to explain what to many is the unexplainable. The theology books attempt to put down on paper the intangible. They work to underpin a faith in something that many don't understand how to see with their own eyes. They assume the reader is aligned not only to the existence of an omniscient God, but that they are also comfortable with the fact that God's presence, actions, and ways of operating are something that can be explained. And this is what I'm thinking about when, like, how did I get here? I'm like, where do you want me to start? That's where I started. Just next to those books are volumes that look to tease apart the systems and the realities that we humans currently exist within to build something new. They seek to solve the problems of our universe, not by explaining what underpins it, but by instead imagining, indeed, again, what else is possible. These stories paint pictures of worlds that have nothing to do with the God so focused on within the books on the next set of shelves to their left. They are not focused often on why things are the way they are as much as they are challenging us to imagine how the world could be if we stripped away a lot of our assumptions about how things are. Now, my father has clearly done a good job of intentionally or unintentionally passing his passions on to me. As a child, I loved stories that painted a picture of the world as it could be as well, on a smaller scale, I guess. And I was one of those kids who thought I was getting away with something when I was reading a book under the covers with a flashlight. As a parent now, I'm almost certain my parents were thrilled at this practice, because I don't know how I always got away with it. Books were an escape. They were a refuge, a place to find freedom and for my imagination to run wild. I often spent non-reading time daydreaming about inserting myself into those plot lines, thrilled at the notion of solving big problems or stepping out of my own world into another. One example of a favorite book of mine in middle school was called This Place Has No Atmosphere. It told the story of a teenager whose family decides to relocate to the first colony on the moon. I spent Saturdays planted in front of episodes of Star Trek, The Next Generation, I'll Fight You, that's the better one. And then Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine is really good too. I obsessed over movies like Child of the 80s, The Never-Ending Story, The Last Unicorn, and Space Camp. Stories either not of this world or where one cast of characters was given the opportunity to leave this one. As I grew older, I found myself deeply enjoying what I then referred to as dystopian novels that told the story of the world after something had gone gravely wrong and of the people who were struggling to survive to build something new. Now, several years ago, when the political tide in this country was turning what felt to me like to a dark place, and when those in power started using rhetoric that I found frightening, I did make a lot of jokes about how I was just kidding about loving a dystopia. I'm like, just kidding. I didn't really. The world had started taking a shape that I never thought I would see. And while I had faith, it became harder and harder to see how the arc of history was truly bending towards justice. Sometimes it gets hard to remain hopeful. In these last almost 10 years, since my eyes opened up to the dark changes in our political tide that have come to define so much of the injustices that we are now fighting and that I mentioned at the top of my talk, I have continued to turn to books as sources not only of entertainment, but also of hope. During the first years of the pandemic, after a period where I could only consume books and other media that were overwhelmingly positive and joy-filled, right? Like anyone else besides me gets super reliant on super upbeat, happy things like Schitt's Creek, Parks and Recreation, like that's the kind of stuff I was watching. But I also started turning to science fiction more directly, maybe because I wanted out. But this science fiction, I started to understand through my reading, was also understood to be speculative fiction, or as the authors of our reading this morning called it, visionary fiction. It was in these books that I found myself the most comforted. Not necessarily because they were helping me to understand the world around me that seemed so out of step with the way that I had imagined the world would continually go and move towards being better and better. That's how I always thought it would happen when I was a kid. But because these books were reminding me that the world as it is doesn't present the only examples of what is possible, of how we could be living or how we could be in community with each other. I'll settle in on one example of the type of book I'm talking about. And if you've read it, come talk to me after. It was at some point in 2020 when I finally picked up Octavia Butler's book, Parable of the Sower, for the first time. Now, this book could certainly be labeled dystopian fiction, but it is so much more than that. I'll borrow again from Octavia's Brood, the book where we found our reading this morning, for a brief description of this book and its power. Quote, Butler's book, Parable of the Sower, follows the main character, Olamina, a young Black woman who lives in a slightly dystopic future in a gated community. She carries a radically different vision for the purpose of humanity than her Christian family. She believes our destiny is to take root among the stars, to see Earth as a womb rather than a permanent home. She calls her beliefs Earthseed, and she cultivates Earthseed as she matures in the tiny and dangerous container of her home. The central tenet of Olamina's Earthseed is, all that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change. End quote. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever read a book that changed your life, like really, truly felt like it changed your life. But Parable of the Sower was one of those books for me. The tenets of Earthseed, that all that you touch, that you change, all that you change changes you, it wove itself into the fabric of my personal theology. And just as powerful as that concept, reading Butler's work and Adrienne Maree Brown and other scholarship around her work taught me to start viewing these stories as more than stories. They were workbooks. Now, we know our imagination is a powerful tool. It is a source of deep play and can even be a saving grace as it can allow us to escape during times of stress or trauma. But how many of us have had the experience of pausing and realizing that the writers who do the work of envisioning what another world could look like are doing more than telling stories? They're building path towards justice. As a people of faith, as organizers, as activists, it is our duty to stay dedicated to building a new way. But oftentimes we can get so mired down in the work of fighting against prescient oppression and those that we perceive as attacking us that we can forget to take the time to do what those writers are doing, to take the time to envision the world we are fighting for. And in these times where we are laid bare, when we are exhausted and when our heart is breaking for the world, it's an extremely helpful practice and acknowledgement of our own personal inherent worth and dignity to give ourselves some grace when we cannot fathom what to do next, to remind us that we often cannot understand why things are happening the way they are, or possibly that we do not have the luxury of the time it would take to figure it out. Another thing we don't often have time enough to do is illustrating and reveling in the beauty of the world we're working to build. Author and activist Toni Cade Bambara once wrote, "We must make the just and liberated futures we want to build irresistible." These words light a small fire in me because they help me realize that even in my overwhelm, that the lifetime of practice I've kept of storytelling, imagining, and meaning making is actually a tool set that I can employ in the work of collective liberation. How helpful, how medicinal are our imaginations? How powerful. Someone used theirs to build the systems we have now. We can use ours to discover how to shape the next world. Visionary fiction, science fiction, speculative fiction, all of these genres can be sacred text. Creating them can be a sacred exercise. The act of imagining the world we deserve is not only a centering exercise, but a justice-making act. Nothing gets me quite as excited as realizing again and again that, as folk singer Ani DeFranco sings in one of her songs, all of this was just someone's idea. It could just as well be mine. There is so much we do not yet know, so much we have yet to imagine, and as Unitarian Universalists, our roots run deep, not only when it comes to understanding and tying the way things are to a cause and a rational explanation, but we also have a deep tradition of calling out the divinity and the interconnection among all things, and naming that there is a sacredness even in the unknown. Just like my father's library, we contain multitudes. We have so much work to do, but we also have so many tools at our disposal to help us build a new way. Now, as we leave here today, I encourage you to nurture your imaginations, to read Octavia Butler, watch Star Trek, watch The Twilight Zone, read Ursula K. Le Guin, read N.K. Jemisin if you have not. Daydream as you lay in bed at night about what the future could look like. Pick up your pen, take notes on how the world could be, engage in conversation with your community about what you have read and what you have dreamed, and then, even if just for a short time, as a trial, start living as if you're there already. Start demanding of our communities, of our lawmakers, that they take steps in the right direction. Show up to worship on Sunday or to protest on a Friday, inspired and strong, ready to build. Activist and visionary Grace Lee Boggs said, "Another world is possible, another world is necessary, another world is happening, and the only way for us to survive is by taking care of each other." May we remain hopeful. May we remember that we are powerful and that our choices matter. And may we find enough opportunity to rest so that we have the energy to imagine. And may we share that imagination with others. I believe, at least for me, that this is our life's work. And it helps us build the future we leave our children. That this is a world that lies in wait. It's holy work. And we are just the people to do it. May it be so.
Thank you so much. And I assume that afterwards we'll be joining here for a little bit of food, that you'll be able to join, and people have any questions for you or comments about this, I think that can do that. Okay, let's go in, and I think we are getting ready to talk about the offertory. you know, this congregation, the work that we do, is supported by the voluntary generosity of all who contribute both their time and their money. The offering is a sacrament of the free church, and you may place your donation in the plate, or as it comes to you, or on the way out, or any of these codes on here will get you in terms of being able to do that. And while we're listening, while we're collecting that, let us find out what we're going to be listening to.
Good morning. Forrest and I are going to do a song about prejudice, prejudging people on external appearances, skin color, things like that. Don't change. And we are not born with prejudices. I work with some 3- and 4-year-old preschoolers, and they are various colors and sizes, and they make no difference at all about who they play with. It's all acquired. And it is acquired at a pretty early age a lot of times. If you're a parent, you probably have had a 3- or 4-year-old who makes some comment with other people around that you said, "Where did he hear that?" And my wife, "What did that mean?" So we do need to be very careful and realize that kids just soak up anything and attitudes that they hear. A song from South Pacific called "Carefully Taught." You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to be afraid of people whose lies are oddly made, or people whose skin is a different shade. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught before it's too late. Before you are 6 or 7 or 8, to hate all the people your relatives hate, you've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be carefully taught. You've got to be taught to hate and fear. You've got to be taught from year to year. It's got to be drummed in your dear little ear. You've got to be carefully taught.
We thank you very much for these gifts. We plan to use these wisely in the service of our congregation and our community. Now I think we're ready for a little community news. And you can see our website up here. And if you'd like to get our weekly emails, then just send it over to office@uubgky.org, and that will be available. Do we have, I know that there were some. Here we go. And today we're going to have refreshments as we usually do, and then we're going to have At 12:30, we're going to have a congregational meeting, and we ask everyone to, if you've never been to one, they're very exciting, and you can. Now, don't laugh, don't laugh. But it is a way to see some of what goes on, and actually, from the people in power, I think I hear that it will be. It's relatively a short meeting, if I understand. We hope, we hope. Let us go now to our last hymn. And this is for a movie that's going to be March the 19th from 5 to 7, and this will be done and is given by the UCBG Green Sanctuary team and the Wild Ones of Southern Kentucky. And if there'll be a few people here who can talk to you more about that if you'd like that. And next week we will have Kay Witt talking about 5 wishes. And then we can get various things. This is a talk on this, and the facilitators of our talk are Terry Bogle-Smith and Dr. John Downing and Kay Witt, who's I see back here. Did I miss anything? Is there anything else, Michelle? No. Oh, thank you very much. On through that. And now we actually will be closing our live stream. We appreciate very much for people being able to join us, and we hope that you've found the service meaningful, and we would really like to have you come back, check us out again, and please check us if you're here in the area, come in person to see us, or please join us on online. And we tell you now to be well. We have our hymn? Oh, okay. Well, I got ahead of myself. All right, please. I'll step aside then.
Next is number 1017, Building New Way. Now, we've done this recently, so you guys know it starts right quick. So please stand if you're willing or able. And we're going to sing all 4 verses of this. Is that right? You know we got all 4 verses? Well, we'll just see them.
Well, thank you. That was a good way for us now to close. So again, let me bid goodbye to those who have joined us, and we wish you well, and please join us again next Sunday.